Listen carefully, because this is not just a strong line for a video. It is a truth. The man you are today is the father of the man you will become at 70. Read that slowly in your mind. Because that sentence is not motivation. It is not a slogan. It is not something designed to give you a temporary push and disappear by tomorrow morning. It is a biological reality, a spiritual reality, and a brutally honest one. Every habit you repeat, every standard you lower, every decision you delay, every year you drift through without direction, you are building someone. Right now. Not someday. Not later. Right now. And the man you are creating will inherit all of it. He will inherit what you built. He will also inherit what you ignored. That is the part most men do not want to face. The question is not whether that future man will arrive. He will. The question is what kind of man he will be when he gets there. Will he be a man who is strong, free, capable, and at peace with the life he actually lived? Or will he be a man who is bitter, physically diminished, financially trapped, emotionally exhausted, and quietly haunted by the life he knows he could have built but never did? Most men do not think this way. Not deeply. They think about next week, the next deadline, the next bill, the next problem sitting on the desk in front of them. The long view feels abstract, distant, easy to postpone, until one day it no longer feels abstract at all. Until you are standing in a doctor's office at 58, hearing words you were not prepared to hear. Until you open a bank account and realize it is telling you a story you do not want to read. Until it is 3 in the morning, the house is quiet, your life looks respectable from the outside, and yet something inside you feels hollow. That hollowness does not come out of nowhere. It has a source. It is the accumulation of conversations you never had, decisions you never made, standards you never held, years you lived reactively instead of deliberately. Seneca saw this nearly 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." And notice what he was really saying. He was not complaining that life is too short. He was exposing something far more uncomfortable. Much of the emptiness people feel later in life does not come from time being taken from them. It comes from time being given away carelessly, in pieces so small they barely notice it happening. And if we are honest, nothing has really changed. The distractions are shinier now. The excuses sound smarter now. The waste is still the same. That is why, here on Stoicism Breath, this conversation matters. Because today, we are not talking about hacks. We are not talking about 7 trendy habits to try for 2 weeks and forget by the end of the month. We are talking about 7 decisions. The kind of decisions that, once truly made and lived, change the direction of a man's life. These are the decisions that separate the man who reaches 70 with peace, strength, and something real to leave behind, from the man who arrives there with regret, confusion, and a long list of things he meant to do one day. Some of what you hear will land softly. Some of it will land hard. Let it land. Do not skip past the uncomfortable part. In fact, the part of you that wants to skip ahead is usually the exact part that needs this most. So let's begin with the first decision. Build your body before it begins to break. Picture a man who is 71 years old. Every morning he wakes up and sits on the edge of his bed for a while before standing. Not because he is lazy, not because he lacks discipline, but because his body requires negotiation. Every morning is a quiet argument between his will and his joints. He cannot lift what he used to lift. He cannot move the way he used to move. He cannot go where he wants to go without thinking ahead, pacing himself, measuring the cost. His life is not over, but it has narrowed. Room by room, step by step, year by year, until independence itself becomes something fragile, something he has to ration. And this is the part younger men rarely feel deeply enough. At 35, at 40, the body still feels cooperative. It feels reliable. It feels like something that will keep showing up no matter how casually you treat it. And because of that, many men make one of the most expensive mistakes of their lives. They assume strength will wait for them. It won't. Your body is not just about appearance. It is not just about performance. It is your physical sovereignty. It is your ability to remain active in your own life, to stay capable, to move without fear, to participate fully in your family, your work, your purpose, instead of slowly becoming a spectator in all of it. That is why taking care of your body is not vanity. It is responsibility. It is wisdom. It is one of the most practical long-term decisions a man can make. And the cost of ignoring it does not arrive all at once. It arrives gradually, quietly, almost politely, until one day, what used to be easy is now difficult. What used to be automatic now requires effort. What used to feel like freedom now feels like limitation. So the real question is not whether decline is possible. It is whether you are building against it now, while you still can. Now think about that man again. Maybe no one warned him this would happen. Or maybe someone did, and he simply didn't listen. Because at 35, at 40, your body still feels strong. It feels dependable. It feels like something that will always cooperate with you, no matter how casually you treat it. Like oxygen. Like time. Always there, always available. But that belief is one of the most dangerous illusions a man can carry. Jim Rohn once said, "Take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live." And at first, that sentence sounds simple, almost obvious. But when you sit with it for a moment, you realize it is not about appearance. It is not about chasing six-pack abs or impressing people at the gym. It is about sovereignty, the ability to remain capable in your own life. It is about staying strong enough to lift your grandchildren without hesitation, walking into your later years as a participant in life, not a spectator watching from the sidelines. It is about maintaining control over your movement, your energy, your independence, for as long as possible. Here is something many men never fully understand until it is too late. Your muscle mass peaks in your mid-30s. After that, if you do nothing, if you simply rely on daily movement and hope for the best, you begin losing between 3 to 8% of muscle every decade. That number might not sound alarming at first, but do the math. Imagine arriving at 45 having done nothing to protect your physical strength. Without realizing it, you have already borrowed from your future. Quietly, invisibly, year after year. And this is not just about muscle. It is about your heart, your cardiovascular system that determines how long you can endure stress. It is about your bones, the density that protects you from fractures and frailty. It is about your hormones, the chemistry that shapes your mood, your motivation, your focus, your ability to think clearly under pressure. All of it is happening right now. Your body is already in conversation with your habits. The only question is whether you are answering or staying silent. Strength training is not vanity. It is infrastructure. Think of it like maintaining the foundation of a house. Nobody praises the foundation. Nobody takes pictures of it. But if the foundation fails, everything else collapses with it. Your health works the same way. It supports every role you play: father, husband, professional leader. A man who is physically capable carries himself differently. He handles stress better. His nervous system stays steadier under pressure. He sleeps deeper. He recovers faster. And most importantly, his confidence does not come from compliments or approval. It comes from knowing, deep in his bones, that his body is an ally, not an enemy. And the truth is, the work required is not complicated. You do not need an expensive trainer. You do not need perfect genetics. You do not need extreme routines. You need consistency. 3 to 4 resistance training sessions each week. Enough protein to rebuild muscle after effort. Sleep treated not as a luxury, but as a biological necessity. Walking daily, not occasionally. Moving your body the way it was designed to move. These are not hidden secrets. Most men already know them. The difference between the man who thrives and the man who declines is not knowledge. It is execution. It is the willingness to start now, while there is still time to build strength, instead of waiting until your body forces the conversation in a language that cannot be ignored: pain, limitation, dependence. Because here is the reality that few people say out loud. An old man in a weak body becomes a prisoner in his own home. That is not poetic exaggeration. It is a clinical reality happening in millions of households across the country. Men who once led families, built careers, solved problems, now negotiating with stairs, furniture, and gravity itself. So when you train your body before it breaks, you are not being vain. You are being wise. Wise in the most practical, irreversible way a man can be wise. And now, we move to the second decision, one that determines not just your comfort, but your freedom. Because financial desperation does not always look like poverty. Sometimes, it looks like a man who cannot say no. A man sitting in a meeting where he is quietly disrespected, not because he lacks courage, but because he lacks margin. He cannot afford to walk away. He cannot afford to lose the paycheck. He cannot afford the risk. It looks like a man watching opportunity knock. A new business, a relocation, a chance to finally do work aligned with who he truly is, and having to turn it down because his financial foundation is too thin to support change. It looks like working not because the work has meaning, but because stopping would feel like catastrophe. And that is not just a money problem. That is a freedom problem. Here on Stoicism Breath, we call this what it truly is: a structural trap. Not built in a single day, but constructed slowly, decision by decision, expense by expense, year after year. And the longer it goes unaddressed, the harder it becomes to escape. That is not a money problem. It is a freedom problem. And it is one of the quiet tragedies that unfolds in the lives of men who never made the conscious decision to build their lives with intention. Not drift. Not react. Build. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "A man in debt is so far a slave." And he was not talking about morality. He was not accusing anyone of weakness or failure. He was pointing to something structural, something mechanical about how life works. Debt does not just sit on your bank statement. It sits on your nervous system. It shows up in your posture when you walk into work. It shows up in the hesitation before speaking your mind. It shows up in the opportunities you never take because the margin is too thin, the risk feels too dangerous, and the consequences feel too heavy. Financial fragility narrows your world. Not overnight, but slowly. It makes you cautious in ways that feel responsible on the surface, yet quietly cost you opportunities you will never even know existed. A job you never left. A business you never started. A move you never made. A dream you kept postponing until it became background noise. Because real wealth is not about what you own. It is about what you can walk away from. It is about having the strength to leave a job that is draining your health, the ability to say no to situations that violate your values, the flexibility to invest time into your children, your partner, your purpose, instead of selling every hour just to survive. That is what financial freedom really means. Not luxury. Not excess. Freedom. Before the age of 45, every man needs to make a clear and sustained decision about money. Not a vague promise like, "I'll save more someday." Not a wish. Not a plan written once and forgotten. A decision. And real decisions always show up as actions. It looks like attacking consumer debt with urgency, the same urgency you would bring to a real emergency, because financially speaking, it is one. Every dollar trapped in debt is a piece of your future already spent. It looks like building an emergency fund that gives you breathing room, not a token amount that disappears the moment life throws you one unexpected expense. Because life will throw that expense. It always does. It looks like investing consistently, even imperfectly, into assets that grow quietly while you live your life. Not chasing perfection. Not waiting for the perfect moment. Just steady, disciplined action over time. And perhaps most importantly, it looks like learning the difference between spending that serves your future and spending that only comforts your present. That difference changes everything. The man who understands money as a tool to buy time, flexibility, and options, lives in an entirely different psychological world than the man who spends everything the moment it arrives. One man feels tension with every financial decision. Fear, pressure, limitation. The other feels space, choice, possibility. And one of the simplest but most powerful rules you can adopt is this: pay yourself first. Before the bills. Before convenience. Before comfort. Set aside something, even a small amount, for the future version of yourself. Picture him. The man at 65. He is coming whether you prepare for him or not. whether you ignore him or not. The only question is what you are sending him: strength or struggle, gratitude or desperation. Because the future is not random. It is delivered daily, through your decisions. And when a man truly understands this, when he becomes tired of feeling financially trapped, something shifts inside him. He stops thinking like a spender and starts thinking like a builder. That shift is where freedom begins. Now we move into the third decision, the one many men avoid, not because it is unimportant, but because it touches something deeper than money or muscle. Decision 3. Heal your own spirit. This is the point most men skip. Not because it does not resonate, it resonates immediately, deeply, in a place most men rarely speak about in public. They skip it because it requires something uncomfortable. It requires sitting with yourself, without distraction, without noise, without performance. It requires looking honestly at patterns you have spent years justifying, behaviors you told yourself were normal, reactions you blamed on circumstances, habits you explained away as personality. And sometimes, this is the hardest part. It requires admitting that some of what you have been carrying is not strength. It is weight disguised as strength. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once observed, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." That sentence does not describe dramatic breakdowns. It describes something much quieter, much more common. It describes the slow erosion of authenticity that happens when a man spends years performing a version of himself instead of living as himself. Every man carries wounds. Some are obvious. Most are hidden. The wounds of childhood, of rejection, of betrayal, of being told, in ways subtle or direct, that who you were was somehow not enough. Those wounds do not disappear with time. They do not fade simply because years pass. They go underground. They change form. They show up in how you react to stress, in how you speak to the people you love, in how you protect yourself when vulnerability feels dangerous, in how you push people away without realizing you are doing it. Many men learn to hide those wounds behind competence, behind humor, behind constant forward motion. But hidden wounds still shape behavior. And the man who never does the work of healing eventually pays for it, not in one dramatic moment, but in quiet ways that accumulate over time. Those wounds do not disappear with time. They go underground. They change shape. They hide beneath productivity, beneath humor, beneath the constant motion that so many men use to avoid silence. And eventually, those wounds begin to surface in places you never expected. They show up in the way you parent your children, in the way you respond to love, sometimes accepting it, sometimes pushing it away without understanding why. They show up in the standards you hold other people to, standards that may not even belong to you, but were handed to you years ago by someone who judged you unfairly. And if that work is never done, if a man keeps avoiding himself, something happens quietly over time. By the time he reaches 60, there is often something inside him that is hard to describe but impossible to ignore. A low, steady bitterness. A tension toward life that does not have a clear source. The people closest to him can feel it, like a shift in the weather inside the home. Not loud, not explosive, just constant. And the truth is, he is not a bad man. He is an unexamined man. The reflection he avoided at 35 becomes the peace he cannot find at 60. That is why healing is not weakness. And it is important to be precise here, because this word is misunderstood. Healing does not mean becoming soft. It does not mean losing your edge. It does not mean giving up your opinions or pretending anger never exists. Healing means your past no longer controls your present. It means the difference between reacting automatically and responding intentionally, between repeating old patterns and consciously choosing new ones. That is what real strength looks like. For some men, that work happens through therapy. For others, it begins with honest self-reflection. For others still, it happens through spiritual practice, journaling, or deep conversations with people who truly know them, not acquaintances, not surface-level friendships, but real relationships. However the path begins, the result is always the same. You become lighter. Not weaker, lighter. The energy that was once tied up in resentment, guilt, fear, or unresolved pain becomes available again. Available for building something meaningful. Available for creating peace instead of carrying tension. And here is a powerful truth to remember. A quiet house at 70 can feel like a sanctuary or a prison. And the difference rarely comes from the house itself. It comes from the man living inside it, the one who did, or did not, make peace with his past. If you are finally ready to put down what no longer serves you, that is where transformation begins. Now we move into the fourth decision, one that shapes your relevance, your confidence, and your long-term security. Master a craft until you are undeniable. There is a certain kind of invisibility that happens to men who drift through their careers without depth. It does not happen all at once. It is gradual, almost invisible at first. 1 year, you are dependable, reliable, solid. 2 years later, you are still competent, but no longer exceptional. 3 years after that, someone half your age walks into the room and begins doing what you do, faster, cheaper, with more energy. Not because they are more talented, but because they went deep while you stayed comfortable. The author Stephen McCraney once said, "The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried." And that sentence reveals something many people misunderstand about mastery. Mastery is not about talent. It is not about confidence. It is not about starting strong. It is about continuing long after most people stop. It is about enduring the early phase, when you are clumsy, unsure, and honestly not very good. It is about pushing through the stage where you are mediocre, without convincing yourself that mediocre is enough. Because improvement does not look dramatic from the inside. Most of the time, it feels slow, boring, repetitive, invisible. You show up, you practice, you fail, you adjust, you repeat. And for a long time, nothing seems remarkable. Until one day, without warning, the results begin to compound. Suddenly, the skill becomes visible. Suddenly, your value becomes undeniable. To be useful is to be relevant. That is not corporate language. That is survival language. The man who develops a rare skill, something difficult to replace, difficult to imitate, gains a kind of security that no job title can guarantee and no layoff can completely remove. Because his value does not exist on paper. It exists inside him. And one of the biggest mistakes modern culture encourages is breadth without depth. We celebrate people who know a little about everything. The man who can talk about many topics sounds impressive at dinner tables and social gatherings. But impression is not impact. Impact, the kind that creates real income, real stability, real meaning, comes from depth, from staying with something long enough to see what others never see, simply because they gave up too early. Real impact, the kind that creates security, meaning, and lasting confidence, does not come from knowing a little about many things. It comes from depth, from going so far into one skill, one discipline, one craft, that you begin to see patterns others miss, simply because they stopped too early. Before the age of 45, a man must make a deliberate choice about his craft. Not the thing that sounds impressive when you say it out loud. Not the title that gets attention at a dinner table. But the thing you are willing to struggle with. The thing you are willing to be bad at for a long time. Because you understand that mastery always begins with awkwardness. It could be leadership. It could be engineering, writing, carpentry, financial analysis, teaching, medicine, fitness coaching. Whatever the craft is, the formula remains the same. You show up when motivation is low. You do the work when no one is watching. You keep practicing when the early excitement fades and the routine becomes repetitive. You go deeper when most people would stop and say, "This is good enough." Because skill, real skill, is the only currency that does not inflate. Money can lose value. Titles can disappear. Markets shift. Companies close. But the man who has built a deep capability carries something with him that no external force can easily take away. He carries certainty, not loud, not boastful, but quiet and unshakable. You can see it in the way he walks into a room. While others are guessing, he knows. While others hesitate, he moves. And that confidence is not purchased. It is not performed. It is built, hour by hour, repetition by repetition, in the silent hours nobody applauds. If you want to know whether someone is serious about mastery, do not look at what they say. Look at what they do when no one is watching. That is where mastery lies. That is where identity is built. Now we move into Decision 5, one of the most uncomfortable truths a man eventually faces if he is paying attention. Prioritize character over reputation. At some point in life, if a man is honest with himself, he begins to notice something unsettling. The person he presents to the world, and the person he actually is in private, are not exactly the same. Not wildly different. Not criminal. Not necessarily dishonest in obvious ways. But there is a gap. A subtle performance layer. A version of himself designed for approval, shaped for audiences he may not even respect. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The time is always right to do what is right." He spoke those words in the context of justice and equality, but the deeper truth applies to every man's private life. Because the right thing is often the thing you keep delaying. The conversation you have avoided. the promise you made but quietly broke, the standard you claim to believe in, but fail to uphold when no one is watching. That gap between appearance and reality is where unease begins. Reputation is social. It is what people see. Character is structural. It is what remains when the room is empty and the applause is gone. And here is the truth about character that many people underestimate. It cannot be faked forever. Reputation can be managed, carefully crafted, adjusted, edited, filtered. But character reveals itself in the unguarded moments, the small decisions that feel invisible at the time. It shows in how you treat people who cannot benefit you. It shows in what you say about someone when they are not present. It shows in whether you keep your word when breaking it would go unnoticed. It shows in the man your children experience when you are tired, stressed, and no longer performing. Men who focus only on reputation live with a constant pressure, always adjusting, always managing appearances, always protecting an image. That life creates a specific kind of exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but psychological fatigue. Because deep down, they know something is unstable. They know the foundation is not solid. And no amount of success can quiet that feeling if the structure beneath it is weak. But men who build character, truly build it, live differently. Not because life becomes easier, but because life becomes simpler. The person they are in private is nearly identical to the person they are in public. There is no heavy mental cost to maintaining an image, no constant calculation, no performance anxiety. They live lighter. There is an old image that stays with many who study Stoicism. A man with a clean conscience sleeps on stone as if it were silk. That image captures something powerful. Because comfort does not come from luxury alone. It comes from integrity. The most luxurious house in the world cannot provide peace to a man who knows he is living dishonestly. Meanwhile, a modest life built on truth often feels deeply peaceful. So before the age of 45, the mission is not perfection. The mission is alignment. Look honestly at the places where your public self and your private self diverge. Ask yourself, where am I performing instead of living truthfully? Where am I pretending instead of improving? And here is what most men discover when they finally close the gap. The cost of honesty is usually smaller than they feared, and the relief is far greater than they expected. Now we move into decision 6. A decision that becomes more urgent as life moves faster. Let go of the trivial. By the time a man reaches 45, if he has paid attention to his own life, he can see a record of where his energy is gone. And for many men, a painful portion of that record includes wasted battles. Arguments that changed nothing. Grudges carried for years long after their purpose expired. Obsessing over what someone else was building, earning, posting, saying. Trying to win debates nobody remembers. Replaying conversations in your head with people who stopped thinking about you days ago. This is how energy disappears. Not in dramatic explosions, but in slow, steady leaks. And the tragedy is not just the time lost, it is the life that could have been built with that same energy. Think about how many times you have replayed a conversation in your head, long after it ended. Days later, Sometimes weeks later, you revisit every word, every tone, every imagined response, while the other person moved on within hours and never thought about it again. That quiet replaying of old conversations is one of the most invisible ways men waste their strength. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But understand this, he did not write those words from a quiet retreat or a peaceful mountain. He wrote them while running an empire, while managing wars, while facing betrayal, while watching people he loved suffer and die. He was writing from chaos, not comfort. And that matters because it proves this principle is not theoretical. It is practical. It is survival-level wisdom. Marcus understood something that changes everything once you truly accept it. The only territory you fully control is the one inside your own mind. After 40, that insight becomes priceless. Because by then, life has shown you something clearly. You cannot control what people think about you. You cannot control whether someone treats you fairly. You cannot control the economy, timing, luck, or the decisions other people make that ripple into your life. But there is one domain that remains fully yours: your attention. And attention is not endless. It is your most non-renewable resource. Every hour spent fighting battles that change nothing is an hour stolen from building something meaningful. Every night spent lying awake replaying anger, resentment, or frustration is a night your body fails to recover the way it should. And over time, those lost hours accumulate into fatigue, weakened health, strained relationships, and missed opportunities. Every relationship damaged by petty conflict is one less relationship available when life becomes truly difficult. And life always becomes difficult at some point. So here is a simple but powerful rule. If a conflict does not change the direction of your life in a meaningful way, it does not deserve your energy. Not because you are weak, because you are strategic. There is strength in restraint. There is wisdom in choosing which battles deserve your sword. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every disagreement deserves escalation. Not every wrong requires your correction. This is not about becoming passive. Some battles are worth everything you have. Some values must be defended. Some lines must be held, even at great cost. But wisdom lives in the distinction. The man who learns to distinguish between meaningful conflict and meaningless noise becomes extraordinarily effective. Not loud, not dramatic, not reactive, just focused. While others burn themselves out fighting everything, he builds something. So simplify your conflicts deliberately. Protect your attention the same way you would protect your savings, your investments, your financial capital. Because attention is capital. It is being spent every minute, whether you realize it or not. Every argument you engage in costs you time. Every distraction costs you clarity. Every grudge costs you energy. And the older you get, the more valuable that energy becomes. That brings us to decision 7, the foundation beneath every other decision. Speak the truth, especially when it is inconvenient. Everything we have talked about so far leads to this point. Physical discipline, financial freedom, emotional healing, mastery, character, focus, all of it rests on one essential question. Are you willing to be honest? Honest with yourself first. Honest with the people who matter. Honest with the world about who you really are and what you truly stand for. Mark Twain once said, "If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything." It sounds clever, almost humorous, but it is actually a deeply accurate psychological observation. Because dishonesty carries a maintenance cost. Every lie, even small ones, requires memory. You must remember what you said. You must remain consistent. And often, you must create additional lies to support the first one. Over time, this becomes exhausting. Not in an obvious way, but in a slow, heavy way that makes life feel more complicated than it needs to be. Many men who live behind half-truths eventually reach a point where they no longer know what they truly believe. Their opinions shift depending on the room. Their identity becomes performance instead of reality. And relationships built on performance always feel hollow, even when they appear successful from the outside. A life built on lies is like a house built on sand. That is not poetry. That is engineering. A house on sand may stand for years. It may look strong. It may even appear impressive. But sand shifts. Ground moves. Pressure comes. And when the ground shakes, and it always does, the truth reveals itself. Illness comes. Financial hardship comes. Loss arrives. Relationships are tested. And in those moments, integrity is what holds the structure together. Not reputation. Not appearance. Not charm. Integrity. That is the foundation that survives the storm. Life does not send warnings before it tests you. Health crises arrive without permission. Financial breakdowns appear when you least expect them. Relationships fracture. Loss comes quietly, without announcement, and when it does, it demands everything you have, your strength, your clarity, your identity. And here is what separates the men who stand firm during those storms from the men who collapse under pressure. It is not luck. It is not intelligence. It is foundation. The men who survive those moments with their sense of self intact are almost always the men who spent years building something real inside themselves. They do not panic and invent a new identity under pressure, because they never lived behind a false one to begin with. They have practiced honesty long before crisis forced it upon them. That is what speaking the truth really means. Not brutality. Not harshness. Not using honesty as a weapon against people you claim to care about. There is a counterfeit version of truth-telling that many people confuse with strength. It sounds bold. It feels powerful. But in reality, it is selfishness dressed in philosophical clothing, honesty delivered without empathy, truth spoken without care, words used to dominate rather than to build. That is not strength. That is immaturity. Real truth is quieter, more deliberate, more courageous. It is the willingness to have the conversation you have been postponing for months, sometimes years. The one you rehearse in your head, but never speak out loud. The one where you say what you truly see, what you honestly feel, and what you genuinely need, not with aggression, but with clarity. Not with cruelty, but with compassion. Truth requires courage. Because truth costs something. Sometimes it costs comfort. Sometimes it costs approval. Sometimes it costs temporary peace in exchange for long-term integrity. But here is the difference most men discover too late. Truth charges you once. Avoidance charges you every day. Every day you stay silent when you should speak. Every day you pretend when you should clarify. Every day you hide behind comfort instead of standing in honesty. That cost accumulates. Quietly. Invisibly. Until one day, life feels heavier than it should. If this truth resonates, then it is worth acknowledging it honestly, not to impress anyone, but to remind yourself that clarity begins with admission. Now let's bring everything together. Because the man you are today is still the father of the man you will become at 70. That truth has not changed since the beginning of this conversation. But something inside you may have shifted. Maybe the way you are hearing these words now feels different than it did at the start. Maybe some of these ideas landed harder than expected. That is not accidental. That is awareness beginning to grow. What we have talked about today are not 7 wishes. Not 7 motivational phrases. Not 7 things you write down once and forget by February. These are 7 decisions. Real decisions. The kind that demand action inside the actual texture of your daily life. Build your body before it breaks. Because strength built today becomes independence tomorrow. Secure your freedom through disciplined capital. Not for luxury, but for choice. Do the internal work of healing. Because wounds ignored do not disappear, they relocate, and they affect everything you build afterward. Master something deeply. Because true value comes from depth, not noise. Choose character over performance. Because the man you truly are will always matter more than the image you display. Release battles that yield nothing. Because your energy is too valuable to waste on conflicts that produce no growth. And speak the truth. Especially when it costs you something. Because integrity built early becomes resilience later. William James, the Harvard psychologist and philosopher, once wrote, "The greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives." He was not creating a slogan. He was describing observation, years of watching people who made real decisions, not imaginary ones. People who committed to change and followed through consistently. People who understood that action, repeated daily, creates results that luck alone never could. Regret is not loud. It does not shout. It lingers quietly, like a ghost that follows the man who waited too long, postponed too often, and told himself there would always be more time. But the man who starts building today, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but sincerely, creates something extraordinary over time. Progress compounds. Just like interest in a bank account. Slowly at first. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Then one day, suddenly, powerfully, the results become undeniable, even to him. And here is the truth that frees you from guilt. You did not need to be perfect until now. No man has been. The past is fixed. What comes next is not. The man you will be at 70 is being constructed right now, brick by brick, decision by decision, habit by habit, and what you choose to do after this moment ends. That future version of you will look back at this day in one of two ways. Either as the day something finally shifted, or as another day that slipped quietly into the past while nothing changed. And here is the powerful part. You still have time. Not endless time, but enough time. Enough time to begin. Enough time to correct direction. Enough time to build something worth standing on. If this message reached a place inside you that feels real, not entertaining, not theoretical, but real, then it deserves to move beyond this moment. Because somewhere in your life, there is someone drifting, someone hesitating, someone standing at a crossroads, waiting for clarity they have not yet found. Share this with them. Not as pressure, as invitation. And as you move forward from here, let one truth remain clear. Legacy does not start later. Legacy starts today. The men who build extraordinary lives are not the ones who wait for perfect conditions. They are not the ones who wait until confidence feels complete or fear disappears. They act anyway. Before the sun sets on another day that could have mattered. Because the clock is already moving. The man at 70 is already being built. The only question that remains is this. Will you build him deliberately? Or leave him to chance?